Before we get into today's video, I want to take a second to give a hearty thank you to our sponsor of this week's video, Newport Landing Burial at Sea. So a little personal story here. When my dad passed away, we actually had a burial at sea for him. He loved the ocean, he loved fishing, and it really felt like the right way to say goodbye. But I will be honest, arranging it was not easy. We had no idea of the logistics and the permits and everything that was required to give him the send-off that we thought he deserved. If you've lost someone with a deep connection to the ocean, like my dad, or if you're trying to honor a loved one's unique wishes, Newport Landing Burial at Sea is the gentle, meaningful send-off that you've been looking for. Based in Newport Beach, they serve families all across Southern California, including LA, Orange County, Riverside, and even Catalina Island. With over 20 years of experience, they offer 3 types of different ash scattering services, and they can customize the ceremony to your family's needs. Newport Landing Burial at Sea understands grief because many of them have lived it, and they are committed to helping you create a peaceful, respectful send-off. Whether your person loved the water, wanted an eco-friendly burial, or just wanted something unique and different, Burial at Sea is such a wonderful way to honor that. So if you're in the greater Los Angeles area, please check out Newport Landing Burial at Sea. You can learn more at apeacefulburialatsea.com. Thank you again to Newport Landing Burial at Sea for sponsoring today's video. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mourning Coffee Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Carlock, and I am super excited for my guest today. There is a meaningful connection between actually my guest and my guest's husband and my daughter, Libby, that I'll explain in a bit after we chat with her. But Kelly Cervantes is my guest today. She is an amazing author, advocate. Her best-selling book, Normal Broken, is just fantastic. She is going to be talking about her journey going through grief and the challenges of caring for a medically complex child. I cannot wait to speak with her. She is just very my type of grief person, just brutally open and honest and heartfelt and raw and real. And I cannot wait for you to meet her today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring her on. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Brooke.
I'm
so excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So I always start off asking what everyone is drinking this morning because I always drink the same thing. It's protein coffee, a concoction that I make. So what's in your cup?
Coffee with lactate.
With lactate. All right. That's the first time I've had that, I think, in all of my episodes. All right. Good to know. You know what? Still better than tea. I hate tea. So as long as it's coffee,
all day long. I think
me.
I'm East Coast time, so it's 11 o'clock. So this is my third cup for the morning. It's fine. It's fine.
Nice. All right. Well, usually, Kelly, I have people start off kind of telling a little bit about themselves. I know I already shared kind of my connection with you, but for our audience, anyone who's listened to me for any amount of time knows that my daughter Libby was absolutely obsessed with Hamilton. It is one of the things that she and I shared. We knew every single word to the soundtrack, and I'd actually, before she passed away February 9th of 2022. And that Christmas, I had gotten her tickets to go with me to Broadway to see Hamilton. And then she passed away 2 weeks before we were supposed to go to the show. And it was just, Hamilton is still one of those things that is just quintessentially Libby for me. Anytime I hear anything about Hamilton, it is just I have so many beautiful memories with her. She, dressed as Hamilton characters for Halloween, and we were planning for her 11th birthday, a Hamilton themed birthday party. So your husband, Miguel, actually played Hamilton, which is just, I'm fangirling over here, just being able to speak with you. But yeah, so anyway, just wanted to share the connection with my audience. And if I seem a little giddy talking to you, that is why, because it is a huge reminder of my beautiful daughter, Libby. But This
I
show is
love
about you.
that.
So, why don't we start off with you kind of telling my audience a little bit about your journey and how you got to
Yeah.
where you are?
Yeah. So, I mean, interestingly, my sort of real grief journey, what really sort of launched me into this space really came into our lives at the exact same time that Hamilton did. So, Miguel was working as an actor, but I think it had been like a year since his last Broadway show. He'd sort of, been doing workshops. He was thinking of leaving the business. I was our family's primary breadwinner. He called me his sugar mama. I was, um, working as in event sales in restaurants, um, and it was great. And then Miguel got called into a audition for Hamilton, and it was his second time going in. He had been in before when they were at the Public and they were going to transfer
Mhm.
to Broadway, and they had politely shown him the door, and he had never heard anything. So when he went into audition for Hamilton the second time, we weren't exactly holding our breath. This was all happening. I was about to leave the restaurant group that I had been at for the last 5 years, and I was going to take over a big promotion with a new restaurant group. And that same week, that was that I was leaving my job of 5 years, that Miguel got the call that he had landed the role of Alexander Hamilton for 1 month as the understudy in New York before he would open the Chicago company as the lead Alexander Hamilton, was the same week that our daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy.
Yeah.
And she already had um, developmental delays. She was 7 months old at the time. But we still really thought that this was something that she was going to overcome, that this was a blip. I thought epilepsy, no big deal. You give her a pill, she's going to be fine, get these
Right.
seizures under control. She had low muscle tone. That was my bigger concern. I was like, we just have to get her, like, cognitively, she seemed like she was there. It was all physical delays. And then 2 months later, the seizures um, became worse and she was diagnosed with infantile spasms, which is a particularly devastating form of pediatric epilepsy. Um, Many children, if they are diagnosed with infantile spasms and they have had an otherwise typical infanthood, they can go on to lead typical lives. But children who are diagnosed with IS and already have significant delays tend to have significantly compromised lives.
Mhm.
And that would be our situation. So I am navigating all of this from Adelaide's hospital bedside while Miguel is learning all of these 900 lines or however many it is in this show.
A lot.
And so it is so much. Miguel would describe it to a reporter. He was like, it was like, you're holding onto a rocket in one hand and a parachute in the other. And Hamilton at this time, so this is 2006. It This is before it's won all of the Tonys. It has
Mhm.
taken over New York City, but it hasn't hit Disney Plus yet. Like, it hasn't
Right.
totally taken over the country in the way that it would. But it's like getting a lottery ticket, like winning the lottery. We knew that our lives were going to drastically change,
Mhm.
but we had no real scope of how or what that meant. For me, that meant that I was giving up my career um, for what I thought would be temporary.
Yeah.
I would get our family to Chicago and we would figure it out. But Adelaide's health issues kept getting worse. We were never really able to get control of her seizures. She ended up needing a G tube to eat. She ended up having breathing issues. Like, the symptoms just kept piling
Right.
on, and I became her. My job was her primary caregiver, and so my first, you know, I experienced so much grief. There's the grief that, like, your child is not going to lead the life that you had dreamed for them,
Mhm.
but then that impacts your family. It's Your family is not going to have is not going to look like what you thought that they were going
Right.
to look like, and you're grieving this idealized future that you had. And but then on top of that, I was also grieving being the sugar mama, being my family's breadwinner, I I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mother. That was not my dream. And but here I was doing that on steroids.
Right.
And so I was grieving this life that I had wanted for myself. Meanwhile, my husband is on stage, getting standing ovations. He's on the cover of magazines with Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what is this life? What is happening? But that was our life essentially for 3.5 years in Chicago. Um, in the spring of oh, so sorry, I said 2006 earlier. It was 2016, I guess, right when he got Hamilton, and then in 2019, in the spring of 2019, we discovered that Adelaide's condition. She had been undiagnosed for the duration
Mhm.
of her life. Um, Whatever was causing these issues, it was neurodegenerative, and the doctors essentially said that there was really nothing that they could do.
Yeah.
Um, she was dying, and then she ultimately passed away about 6 months later, on October 12th, 2019, just 5 days before her fourth birthday.
Mm.
Um, and and then that same week, the producers offered Miguel. Hamilton was closing in Chicago the following January 5th, 2020, and the
Yeah.
producers called that same week to offer Miguel Hamilton on Broadway.
Mm.
So Hamilton and Adelaide are so intertwined in our life. These highest of highs and lowest of lows
Yep.
coexisting, and it's been a wild few years.
I was gonna ask because the whole time you were talking, I was thinking, like, I know how it is for me with Hamilton. I'm obviously I'm just a fan. Like, we were just obsessed fans, and Hamilton is such oh, it's a bittersweet thing for me. It is one of those,
Yeah.
like, I think of it super fondly because of all the times we share, but then I cry all the time when I think about like if something Hamilton hits me unexpectedly, it is it
It's
triggers.
filtered in grief. Yeah.
Yes, it is absolutely. So I imagine that is like on steroids for you. I mean, it must be such like a love-hate relationship, I feel, with that. It's
It is to a certain extent, but there is, I'm able to see, that these two pieces of our life coexisted in the way that
Mhm.
they did, but they were also so wildly separate.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it there are pieces of the show that hit me differently. Um, Interestingly, it is not Quiet Uptown after Hamilton's, spoiler alert, Hamilton's son dies. That actually doesn't affect me at all. Um, it's Dear Theodosia that I really struggle
Yeah,
with this.
yeah.
When Hamilton and Burr are singing about the hope that they have for their children's future, and um, a hope that is unrealized, and that to me um, is one of the harder parts of the show. But I am so grateful, I guess. Like, yes, it is bittersweet to a certain extent, but I can't imagine how much more difficult it would have been to take care of Adelaide without the security,
Yeah.
financial, um, all of the ways. I mean, Hamilton offered us so much stability and security in our
Mm.
life that you do not get in the entertainment industry, that you do not get in the hospitality industry,
Right.
and um, that we had that support and we had that cushion throughout her life is just I'm just eternally grateful that the
Yeah.
two did were in our lives at the same time.
Were you guys able to take time to process and grieve after Adelaide died, or was it kind of like a rush back to Broadway and,
It's
jumping
it's
into the swing of
interesting.
things?
I had to force so I refused to stop after Adelaide died because I was terrified of what stopping to grieve would look like.
Yep.
We were such a go 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 family that we kept go go going.
Yeah.
Um It wasn't until, I mean, so the pandemic hit, um, 5 months after she died, and that really forced us to stop and to grieve. And not to say, like, I was still grieving that whole time, um, but I was very much in denial of the full
Mhm.
impact that the grief was having on my life. Um, I was experiencing it, but I wasn't processing it. I I was just sort of going through the motions. My grief was controlling my life, and I think that that's all natural for
Yeah.
those early months. I don't know that it would have been any different, but the pandemic did sort of force this reckoning, and it allowed. So our original plan was that Jackson and I, my son, who's 3 years older than Adelaide, he and I were going to stay in Chicago. He was going to finish out second grade, and then we were going to stay in Chicago for the summer because I love Chicago and I didn't want to leave. Um, and then we were going to join Miguel right before the school year, back on the East Coast, and he was just going to sort of come back and forth between New York and Chicago, and that had been our plan. And in some ways, the pandemic was, a blessing because it forced our family to be together during this crucial time when we really did need each other, and
Yeah.
um, we needed to be a family unit, and that was, it sort of drowned out all the other noise and everything else that would have distracted us, and we got to sort of go on this grief journey, as a family.
Yeah. I I was kind of the same way with the go, go, go. I'm the keep busy kind of person. And I always say it your grief will wait for you. So I'm glad that you had that time. It doesn't go away. It doesn't matter how hard
No,
you work. It kind of hangs around and then waits for you to be less busy and catches up with you eventually. So good. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, despite it being a pandemic that, brought about that time, I'm glad that you guys did have time to spend together and kind of process a little bit. Can you talk about writing Normal Broken? Like when did you start writing that? I know for me, like writing my book, writing for me was one of the most helpful things in my processing. So I didn't know if it was the same for you or, how did the book help your
yeah,
grief journey, I guess?
absolutely. Well, I mean, I had started writing about my grief in real time. I'd started a blog called Inchstones while Adelaide was alive, and I had written about this wild experience that we were on with Hamilton, with Adelaide, parenting a medically complex child, you know, wrapping my head around the disability world, around epilepsy, parenting
Mhm.
a typical child, like all of these aspects of our life. I was writing about that. And then when Adelaide died, I just didn't stop writing.
Yeah.
But now instead of writing about that life, I was writing about this new life. I was writing about grief. I was writing about Miguel and I's relationship in grief, and how Jackson was grieving, and all of the different aspects of, like,
Right.
all. I had thought that I was just going to be grieving Adelaide. I didn't realize that I grieved every way that her life touched mine.
Mm.
And so I it was 100% therapeutic. And in doing so, in writing the weekly blog, I was connecting with all of these other people who were responding about how they were relating to what I
Mm.
was writing. And that alone made me realize that my experience was not unique to me. My grief was unique to me.
Yeah.
The circumstances of it, Adelaide, all of that, that was special and unique to me. But what I was feeling, what I was experiencing was not special. That this was like a very universal, experience, which just gave me the courage to be more honest and
Yeah.
more vulnerable. And so, when Adelaide died, I felt like I had been forced into retirement from this job that I loved. I didn't want to go back into events. Also, it was a pandemic, and so there were no events.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was only 38 when she died. Like, I had no idea what to do with the rest of my
Mm.
life. And um writing felt very natural. It was very healing. I had already been doing it through the blog, and so I decided, maybe there was something here. Maybe I could write this book on my grief experience in this very raw and honest way,
Yeah.
and that I already knew that people were connecting to.
I love that. Um, so one of the things that you mentioned and kind of goes along with that is I'm just sitting here thinking about all these different identity shifts that you've experienced. I mean, it's almost like whiplash. And I know for myself, after Libby died, she was a dancer, so we were in that competitive dance world, and it took up so much time. And once she was gone, I had two older sons, but it was like, what do I do with myself? That was so much of my time and energy was spent on that it was like, I have no idea who I am now, because she was still my young one that needed mothering. Um, and then that was just all of a sudden gone. So can you talk a little bit about, I don't think people pay enough attention to how much your identity changes and how difficult it is to deal with those swings when they happen, and just sitting listening to you going from, being the main breadwinner and having that job in New York to then being a full-time stay-at-home caregiver and then back to New York. It's yeah, I imagine that must have been large adjustment for you.
Over and over and over again. And before I was working in restaurants in New York, I was an actress. And that's how, when I was an actress when Miguel and I met, and I
Mhm.
gave that up because we wanted to start a family. And one of us needed to have, health insurance and a steady
Right.
income. And
Yeah.
um, so I think after Adelaide died, I had been through these identity shifts so many times before, but that doesn't make it easier. I think I was just able to identify that that this was another part of my grief, and so there is an advantage in that, because I do think it is so important to be able to name our grief and to identify it. Like I said,
Mhm.
you're not just grieving a person, you're grieving all the ways that they touched your life. The way Libby, her dance career, her dance
Yeah.
activities touched your life. And for me it was, the way that I woke up and my entire schedule was dictated by, Adelaide's medications and her therapy and her appointments. It was, our home nurse who was in our home 40 hours a week.
Mm.
It was the hospital staff. It was the person who I got coffee from at the hospital, when we were inpatient. It is, there are all of these people. There's the community. I have the epilepsy community and the disability community. And while I still am engaged in these communities, I no longer have the child that attaches
Right.
me to that. And so there's just this disconnect. Um, your grief is just, it's so intricate, and I don't think that we realize that until we are in the thick of it. And so I do think that naming it is helpful. I was very um lucky. I such Anyway,
Yeah.
um I don't know. Because Miguel had Hamilton, I was not forced into a position where I needed to figure out what was next right
Right.
away.
Yes.
I had this cushion to be like, okay, where do I want to go from here?
Yeah.
What is it that I want to do? And so I had, a year plus to figure this out. Now that doesn't mean that, like, even though we had this financial security blanket, that I was like giving myself that time. I wanted
Yeah.
to know immediately what was happening next. And
What do I
um
do?
yes, and I was putting all of this pressure on myself when what really needed to be happening was that I just needed to be grieving, and I just
Yeah.
needed to be in that space. And as it turned out, writing this book and writing the blog, that was exactly what I needed to be doing, and working toward. uh you know it's hard to see that at the time,
Yes.
and to give ourselves the patience to adjust to these new normals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. Well, I mean, I appreciate you realizing that that is, yeah. It. I was didn't mean to chuckle, but I'm chuckling because I know exactly what you mean when you're saying like, oh, I guess I was lucky when my daughter died that I, could stay home. I'm a full-time English teacher, so I had to go back after a month, and that was not nearly
Oh,
enough time. Because,
no.
Libby died in a car accident, so it was totally unexpected, just completely blindsided. But I was the main breadwinner, so I didn't have a choice. I had to go back to work. So I can kind of see that from the opposite side. That yes, you are fortunate, but to say that after someone loses a child is just like
Right.
it sounds like the dumbest thing ever. But it kind of leads me to a question that I have, and it's just something that I experienced a little bit. And I don't know if you have, because you also have a son that was still relatively young, right? When Adelaide died, you said second grade, I
Yeah.
think. Okay, so did you ever experience, I guess guilt is the right word. I know I like after Libby died, like I said, I had the dance. I was so busy all the time. And then she died. And then it was a lot of what do I do with my life now? But then it turned into, oh my gosh, I have all this time. Like I can watch whatever I want to on TV and I don't have to turn on like cartoons and whatever. And I have so much more time now that I would not have had if Libby hadn't died. And I feel so guilty about that sometimes because I'll catch myself being like, oh, it's nice to be able to just like sit down on the sofa and read a book when I could never do that before. And then it's like, shit, I'm the worst person ever for thinking that because I wouldn't have that if my daughter didn't die. And I know like it's, I guess I'm like you, I'm very raw and open. And it's like, yes, I have those feelings. And then I'm like, oh my God, you suck for having that feeling. So I didn't know
Oh,
if you
yeah.
experienced any of that because I
Oh,
imagine
my
that
God.
taking care of a medically complex child has to be so exhausting and complicated that I'm sure there has to be a little element of relief, but then you probably feel so guilty for feeling that relief. I don't know. Did you experience any of that?
100%.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that we traveled by plane without Adelaide, and because we my dad would describe it as if he was like every time we would show up, he's like, it's like you're a small traveling rock
Yeah.
band because of all of her equipment and everything that came
Yeah.
with her. And we would have to go through the security line and they would have to like swab my hands because she had medical grade food that we had to travel with and all of these things. And so I had to like pack in an additional 30 or 45 minutes just to get through the security line
Yeah.
because of all the additional checks that we had to do. And of course, it never stopped me from traveling with her. That would have been, I like to make my life more difficult sometimes than it needs to be, but I was insistent that we still have these experiences. And
Yeah.
so, the first time that we traveled without her and we just zipped through security, and all three of us, Miguel, Jackson, and I, all looked at each other and we were like, wow, that was easy, and just sort of smiling and laughing, and then just
Yeah.
like the realization of, wow, that was really easy because
Yeah.
Adelaide's gone. And so it's moments like that, but it's all of it. I'm not being woken up in the middle of the night by
Mhm.
alarms. It is, how easy it is to leave the house without all of the equipment. It is, you know, and then the guilt doesn't, the guilt morphs. Like at some point I accepted that our life was easier without Adelaide.
Yeah.
And it sucks to say that. Doesn't mean that our life is
It
better,
does.
but
I
our
get it.
life is easier.
Yeah.
And so I say, I accepted that that was the truth and that that didn't mean that it was better. It just meant that it was easier. But then, there's all of this other guilt that came once I really started healing from the grief and I
Mhm.
wasn't like really in the throes of it, but that healing journey had started. And then I felt guilty for healing,
Yep.
for not grieving her all the time. And then years go by and I will come across a picture of her and it is so that life that we had with her is so different from the life that we're leading now. And
Yeah.
looking at those pictures, I know that it's my life, but something about it feels a little bit foreign to me. It feels
Yeah.
distant. And then I feel grief over that, because that life feels, I mean, it was only 5 years ago, but it feels far away now.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the guilt doesn't go away. It just, as our grief is changes over time, that guilt changes over time also.
Oh, I love how you put that because it's so true. It just morphs. But yeah, I have it. I always say there's a million things to feel guilty about in grief, and you shouldn't really feel guilty about any of them because they're all normal reactions. You just feel
Yes.
sometimes like a horrible person for for
Yeah.
having the feelings that you're feeling. So thank you for sharing that because I can't imagine. I mean, I can picture the going through the airport and totally see, yeah, that it would hit you like, oh yeah, it's easier because she's not here and that sucks. And you can
Mhm.
say that it's easier. Like I have those moments where, I'll have a thought or something will come out of my mouth and then it's just like, but but what people have to understand who have lost a child, like you would literally, it doesn't matter how you feel in any circumstance, you would give anything you possibly could to bring them back, for a moment.
Yeah.
It's not that you would never do that. It's just that, yeah, acknowledging that things are different and, in some cases easier is, oh, yeah,
Two
it is a
feelings can
definite.
Many feelings can coexist at the exact same time.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And you talk about that a little bit in your book. You do have another book that you're working on that's coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm actually in my final round of edits right now, which is not stressful at all. It is called The Luckiest. To be a little tongue in cheek, sort of, this idea of, it's memoir, and it looks at the different phases of my life. I was really inspired. There's the poet Maggie Smith. She has this quote where she talks about women as nesting dolls, and we carry all of the previous versions of ourselves inside of
Yeah.
us. And that just spoke to me, especially as we were talking about all of these crazy transitions that I have gone through in my life, and how all of those are still pieces of me, and how I feel so fulfilled in my life right now, because I feel like I am using all of those aspects
Yeah.
of my life, to write, to advocate, to parent, to do all of these, live the life that I'm living right now. And so all and then throughout the book, I'm also sort of examining this idea of what does it mean to be lucky, and lucky as perceived by others. So many people would
Mhm.
look at our life, with Miguel being Hamilton, and
Yeah.
the fun glamorous pictures that I would post on Instagram of us at this black tie event, or Miguel singing the
Right.
national anthem at this
Yeah.
game. And the reality is that I'm checking with our nurse slash babysitter as to how many seizures Adelaide has had while we're gone,
Yeah.
or I had to leave her in the hospital to get to wherever we were going. And so, there's the duality and this idea of what it means to be lucky, and how, like we were just talking about, how I can feel lucky because I didn't have to go back to work after Adelaide died, but my daughter still died. So, like,
Right.
how,
Yes.
and then, so 2 years after Adelaide died, we had the opportunity to adopt a little girl who was 2.5 at the time. And now she just turned 6, our daughter
Oh,
Anessa. And she
yeah.
is wonderful and brilliant and amazing. And I feel so lucky to be her mom. But at the same time, we never would have been able to adopt her if Adelaide
Yeah.
hadn't passed away. We wouldn't I wouldn't be able to call her my daughter if she hadn't had a horrible trauma that
Yeah.
separated and broke apart her own family. So how can I feel lucky because of another family's heartbreak? And so
Right.
just this, it's not even a duality, it's this plurality of these emotions and these contradictions of how one person's luck is another one's misfortune, and how all of that sort of coexists in our lives, and how I have tried to make sense of it all, and in the end still sort of come out feeling fortunate
Yeah.
in all
Oh
of
my
it.
gosh. I can't wait to read it because that, yeah. I've experienced those things myself. So, and had so many of those thoughts. So that sounds fantastic. I know you do still, I think, a lot of work with different organizations, that you became aware of because of Adelaide's condition. Do you feel like they help you kind of remember her and bring purpose to your life being involved with those kind of things?
100%. I joined the board of Cure Epilepsy while Adelaide was alive. We did lots of fundraising for them and still do. I've also since joined the board of the Undiagnosed Diseases Network
Mhm.
Foundation, which was the organization that would eventually find Adelaide's genetic diagnosis years after she passed away. I do not believe that anything in life happens for a reason,
Yeah.
because I do not think that there is a reason good enough that could take our daughters from
Right.
us. Like there's no reason good enough, right? And so, but I do believe that we can make reason out of these really horrible things that happen to us. And if that reason is that I can help raise money and bring awareness to undiagnosed ultra rare epilepsy patients, if that is, raising the money, shining a spotlight, being an advocate, advising on boards, whatever that is, that feels like I can make meaning out of that. In going back to Hamilton, so much of Hamilton is about legacy, and
Yes.
Miguel has said over and over again that he hopes that the legacy that we are creating for Adelaide doesn't come from being the daughter of Hamilton, the actor, one of the
Yeah,
actors
right.
who played Hamilton, but that it's we use that platform to create this legacy for her that you know benefited other families down the road, that allowed other families to not feel so alone, be it from their diagnosis, or the my writing about grief, or
Yeah.
medically complicated, whatever it is, that um, giving purpose to the pain and making meaning out of it, and it keeps me connected to these communities that were so
Yeah.
supportive to us. And so um, it's certainly not all altruistic. It is I love the work, and I love the people.
Agreed. I do the same thing. I have a organization that I started called Live Like Libby, and we raise money for scholarships for dancers in financial need. And I tell people, other grievers, that is probably my number one piece of advice for people in grief, is to try to find a way to help other people. That is, I think, other than writing, I think that is what has helped me the most. And still to this day, like, the greatest joy that I get is knowing that even though I lost Libby, people are remembering her because they get to dance when they wouldn't have been
Yes,
able to,
yes. Well, and
and I
isn't
feel
that
like that
so?
would make her happy. She'd be really proud of that. And you want people to remember your girl, you want
That's the thing, right? Like, that's what you want. I think that was always one of my biggest fears. So many grievers' biggest fears is that
Yeah,
our loved one gets forgotten, or they're only known because of this tragic aspect of their life, and you want them to remember their laugh and
yes,
their goofiness and the music that they loved and the joy that they brought to others. And so by giving back in these ways, by
yeah.
we get to ensure that our loved one is not forgotten.
Yeah. And I love all the different you do so many things, so many different types of advocacy. Um, and the world is a better place because of you. But I also want to kind of extend my my care and concern for you. I know right now you are going through a difficult time personally,
Yeah.
with a medical issue, and I don't know how comfortable, if you want to share what's happening. But I guess in the grief world, an illness is a kind of grief to be dealt with. So I'm wondering if you're comfortable sharing what's going on. Are there any kind of practices? Where do you get your comfort now that you're going through something medical yourself?
Yeah. So in January, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which sucks.
Yeah.
Sort of back to our lucky theme, this really crappy diagnosis, but luckily it was caught early. It is easily treatable. I am going to be fine. Um, I thought that that meant that it would then be easy to go through this process, and that is not what
Yeah.
it meant. um, I had this surgery a week and a half ago, and it knocked me on my ass, and I was not prepared for that. The exhaustion that I felt, um, and it's been really hard. And then knowing that like this is just the first step of the journey, I will have to get radiation. I'll start radiation in a month or so, um, and that it like kicked in a lot of my guilt and grief over
Yeah.
Adelaide and being back in this medical world and understanding what Adelaide must have felt like after going through all of these procedures, and I had no idea. I had no frame of reference, and
Wow.
I'm a really crappy patient. I'm not a patient person either, and so this is um I feel like I've had to train myself mentally to be okay with listening, that I'm forced to listen to my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
I in grief, when I was grieving Adelaide, it was my brain and my body were in sync in that I was just not capable of doing what I had once
Yeah.
been able to do. Right? I went and went and went and tried to keep going, and then I hit a wall. Um, but with this, I feel like my brain is still there and my body is not, and that has been really difficult. Adelaide taught me how to accept help. And
Mm.
so I've really been leaning on that, allowing people to help me. You know, what I am, what I found, I'm going back and watching um, old sitcoms that,
Yeah.
it's the familiar that I loved, and I would rely on during Adelaide's life and afterwards. Um, Reading just silly paperback murder mysteries, and finding, you just finding those escapes and allowing myself to have those escapes, doing a puzzle, just giving myself permission to rest and
Yeah.
to heal. And that is not something I am very good at.
Same. I get it. I get it. Uh,
but
but
it's like I said, I am lucky in that it is, hopefully by, um, July, this is all in the rearview mirror for me,
yeah.
and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, yes, you are lucky, but it still sucks. It sucks.
It
So
still sucks. Yes.
it absolutely sucks. Do you find that being a parent of child loss, do you feel like you're taking it a little differently? I find that my attitude a lot of the time, whether it's healthy or not, is like, I've kind of been through the worst. Like, I just sort of, yeah, I have an attitude of like, this sucks. It's just one more thing. Like,
Yes.
anytime anything bad happens, I'm like, okay.
I definitely think that my barometer for what is hard in life
Yeah.
is askew. I joke all the time that I feel bad for my children because they'll come up to me and be like, I don't feel well, or I got this cut. And I'm like, well, are you seizing? Can you
Right. Yeah.
breathe? You're going to be fine. Put a band aid on it. Do you want
Yeah.
a hug? Like, my barometer for what is life threatening and what I'm really going to get upset or put my energy toward is just,
Yeah.
it's a really screwed up.
Yes.
And and I just sort of acknowledge that, and then it comes back to bite me in the ass, like it has with this diagnosis, where I was like,
Yeah.
it's fine, this isn't going to kill me, so it's going to be okay. And then I go through surgery, and I'm like, oh, right,
Yes.
no, everything can be okay in the end, but the process can still suck. and
Yeah.
and so um yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think my barometer is so askew until like life kicks me in the ass and
All
I have
right,
to
so it's
write
not
it
just
again.
me. That's good.
No.
All right, well,
No.
please, yes, continue taking the time that you need to keep yourself healthy and speed up that recovery. But
Thank
sending you
you.
all my love and strength for that, continuing on that journey, because that
Thank you so
sucks.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no other way to
Yeah.
put it. So how can people stay in touch with you? I know you post quite a bit on Instagram, so I follow you there, and that's kind of where I stay up to date. But where are good places for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Inchstones by Kelly Cervantes. And then through Substack, I send out a weekly newsletter, which includes my blog for the week, as well as any events that I am appearing at coming up, or anything that I'm doing with Miguel, any additional information, fundraisers, or things like that that people might want to be aware of. So that is through my Substack,
Awesome.
substack.com. Yeah.
Okay, can people find that on your website also? Is there a link
They can,
there? Okay.
kellycervantes.com. Super
Okay,
simple, straightforward. You can find all of that there as well as updates
perfect.
on when the new book comes out.
Awesome. I am looking so forward to it. I will put links for all of that in the description of the show when I repost it. But Kelly, thank
Amazing.
you so much for joining us today. And, thank you for being honest and open and sharing pretty much everything in your life. I love that you're just open and you throw stuff out there. I really appreciate
You know
it.
what? I'm just not that special.
Oh,
I am special in all of the ways that Mr. Rogers taught us when we were little,
there
but
you go.
nothing. But my experiences are the way that I feel, and my emotions. They're not unique to me, and so that it's sort of become a superpower in a way, because I
Yeah.
know that no matter what I'm feeling, someone else out there is feeling it too.
Well, keep doing what you're doing because it makes a difference for people to know that they are not alone in all of
Uh,
this. So.
Thank you so much, Brooke.
Of course. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again to our sponsor, Newport Landing Burial at Sea. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.